This video is inspired by one of my favorite subscribers, Trudy. I believe Trudy is also a patron. And Trudy sent a comment. She is against my point of view about this notion of a diminishment of democracy in the backing of one Joe Biden. Trudy, not to pick on you, she says progressives will not stand down if Joe Biden wins. Not only will progressives stand down when Joe Biden wins, progressives will lie down. They will get on their knees, they will put their heads to a hard earth, and they would grab their cheeks and they would spread them wide. Now, why would I come away with a different assessment than what they did when they had the opportunity to have leverage? And when they get an opportunity, or no opportunity because they have no leverage, that something else is going to change in that situation. You offered nothing. You demanded nothing. You got nothing. That's your race. That's where lefties are. That's where blacks are. And that's where a large section of Hispanics are. You are voting entirely for a man out of rank cowardice. And I understand that Trump is an ogre, Trump is a monster, Trump is all of these things and the ending of democracy and everything else. But if that's true, if that is indeed true, why does the Democratic Party risk? Why do they risk the jewel of democracy with a man like that? Meaning this argument cuts both ways. Why is it your responsibility to ensure that Trump doesn't get elected, as opposed to the responsibility of the candidate to get your vote? I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what democracy is, or representative government is, if you want to be more specific. Your candidate is running during a time with 30 million people out of a job, with tens of millions of people potentially getting evicted, flung into the streets from their homes. And honestly, in real terms, that seems to be an afterthought in all of this. The 200,000 people dead, this 7 million people infected. And this is in a situation with a country with 40 million people out of healthcare in the pandemic. That seems to be an afterthought. And that doesn't seem to matter. You have a Medicare For All plan. It gets 88% support. Back in 2008, when Obama ran, you couldn't even get a public option to get a hearing. 88% support. Sanders carried the burden to get it to that point. 70% of America says, yeah, fair enough, we agree. We're in a pandemic. 7 million of us are infected. There's a disproportionate number that are African American or Hispanic because that was the number of people that were dying, etc. And they were exposed to higher incomes, less exposed. Yes, fair enough. We finally agree. We tried Obamacare. Trump care was terrifying. Fair enough. And by the way, Obamacare is on a lifeline as it is. And you still can't get your Democratic representative to back that policy. That's appalling. I shouldn't even have to make this argument. That's where lefties should be. They should be indignant. They didn't even have to make the argument. 30 million people, when Sanders left, when he failed and left, the thing that should have came out of his mouth, and the thing that should have came out of AOC's mouth, and the things that should have came out of TYT's mouth, and the thing that should have came out of every lefty's mouth that believed in Medicare for All, if you don't back this policy, you won't get our support. Period. And leave. Don't wait for the press. Don't wait for it. Just leave. And every time they find you, any random lefty, it could be at McDonald's. Yes, if Joe Biden does not back Medicare for All, he will not get my support. I am one of the 88% of Democrats that back it, but I'm also a lefty that believe in it. And just leave. And if anybody said, well, wait a minute, you're not concerned that that's going to lose the race? And then you say, if the Democratic Party is willing to tank it to a man they call the apocalypse for a policy that has 88% support among Democrats, then they need to explain that. They need to justify that. How do you justify that is my question. How is this in a representative government where one of the parties has a public policy to deal with a public tragedy, and they say no? Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, no, I don't care that you want this. I don't care. No. I don't have anything better. No. But not that. They need to justify that. That's my point. They need to justify it. Any lefty should be screaming that. Because fact of the matter is that is a public position. Meaning I could go down the list in regards to the things that the public agrees with that the Democratic Party doesn't. But that's not weird to you? That the overwhelming majority of the public says yes, and a party says no, and then they expect to get elected on public support? Yeah, I'm saying that's a diminishment of democracy. That's an undermining of democracy. And if 30 million people said, you will not get our support unless you back this policy, how purist are you going to be in this case to not back Medicare for All? I'm making the point that the organic way of beating Trump, the straightforward way of beating Trump, is accepting the policies that your challenger, that was getting the support that you need to win, and appropriating those policies. Basically, America's policies, in order to beat the monster. That's the way to win. That is not how he plans to win. He plans to win with a race to the bottom. And that race to the bottom, where you're going to get people to vote for you out of cowardice, I am making the point, it's not democracy. That is not representative government. That is something else. From in perpetuity, Trudy, you're going to have a monster on the other end. Whether it's Ted Cruz, whether it's Tom Cotton, or whether it's some of the monster that comes out of the swamp that is right there for you, for some squeamish, milquetoast, right-wing Democrat to push up against. When does it stop? This year, you had the opportunity to bring that skits. This year, the left had the opportunity. It had the political momentum. It had the awareness of it all, that these policies were popular. It had a mouthpiece. It had all of the things necessary to make this an issue. And instead, all of you lie down on your bellies. And that's before the race. Why would I have any expectation when you give up all of your leverage and power before the race that somehow on the other side of the singularity, magically, infinite leverage? I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. That's the thing that people tell themselves in order to get over the hump until they get past the horizon and realize, oh, right, past the horizon is just like it was before the horizon with the addition of me having no leverage in this process. I'm sorry. You're not going to get what you want. Your way of getting what you want is not begging. And I hate to tell you this. The crux, the thing that you always going to hit your head against, is the fact that they are willing perfectly to tank it to Trump, and you are not. That's the deal that you have to deal with. That's the thing you have to deal with. At the end of the day, Nancy Pelosi losing to Donald Trump, she keeps her $100 million. Her life doesn't get miserable, regardless of what her political disposition is. She still keeps her job. She keeps her congressional, whatever money she gets from that, and she keeps ticking along. Most of the people who you see on television who are jumping around angry at Trump, they're millionaires. They're of a particular class. They will be perfectly okay if Trump hits the skids. No, the reality of it is the people who take the hit are the lefties. The millionaires, the billionaires in the Democratic Party will be fine. The Republicans that they're reaching out to that's going after Trump, they will be fine. The crux of the matter is that the Democratic Party is two elements in that party. Dirt poor, very well off. And those very well off will be okay regardless of what happens. In the context of the poor in the party, the lefties, the African Americans in many respects, many of the Hispanics, not so much. It's a vote of dependence. It's not a vote of assertive will. And my point is, your leverage is the capability and the even and to hit and willingness to let them lose and fail. It is not your responsibility to get them elected. It is their responsibility to get your vote. And for ever long, you keep this weird finger trap of, okay, I'm so terrified that they're going to lose, that I just give them all of my support. I'm not going to ask questions. I'm not going to push. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to lay down until you, and for as long as that exists, where you can always get to that point, you would always lose. That's always the trigger point. That's always the point of fear. Oh, too hot, too hot. But I'm making a point that that trigger point is the thing that they use to compel your fear. And that's the thing that allows them to basically have Joe Biden to tell you to go vote for the other guy. I mean, I'm being honest. Think about it for yourself. Where does it go to? Why are you unwilling to take that disposition? Why are 30 million people not willing to say, you get our vote when you represent our interests, and you will fail and lose otherwise? You may say leadership, okay. You may even say, well, it's a group dynamic and everything else. Yes. But ultimately, those people are unwilling to do that because they're terrified that the party will lose. Blacks vote out of fear, not because they love the Democratic Party. I suspect that Democrats on some level know this, and that lefties are, being more aggravated by this, in which case, probably why they're trying to get Republicans to come on stage and consolidate a group of Republicans where they don't need you. And they can have you to be dependent on them that much more without them not caring about the fact that your interests. I'm telling you, you don't believe me? Look at what took place in 2020. It's there. It's available. It's straightforward. Well, I'm not going to, belabor the point. Yeah, I'm not going to belabor the point. People may agree or disagree with me on this. But politics, it really is leverage. Get my vote, represent my interests. And when you have a pandemic, when you have this many people that are in a situation of desperation, and the party just doesn't seem to care, then the party has to ask themselves, why don't they care about my interests? And why don't they care about the things that I want? You have to deal with that. That's an honest reality. People put their heads in the sand because they're so used to 40, 50 years of doing the exact same thing, of just voting for the lesser evil in this nonsense. But I am talking about your country is in peril. Think of the Great Depression and what FDR did. And think of the paltry paucity of ideas that these people come up with where the American public is an afterthought. I'm making the point that the reason the American public is an afterthought because the American public never asserts itself as a demand. What do you want? And I'm making the point that Medicare for All, of anything that anybody wants, makes perfect sense in the midst of a pandemic. We want Medicare for All. The party can tell you to kick rocks, or it can appropriate the policy. If it indeed says kick rocks, that they would rather lose to man they call the end of all things, as opposed to appropriate a policy that has 70% support of the public, then that is on the party. Until you're willing to go there, nothing changes. Like, share, and subscribe.